is Ray Collazo, and you're watching and listening to the Bomba Live Found in Translation simulcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Found in Translation is a show that stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. Bomba Live is a virtual Puerto Rican celebration. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this Thriving in the Fight edition of the show. And you're going to hear in a moment from our author and co-host about how we can not only survive in this fight, the fight of our lives here 2020 on so many levels, but how we can thrive. Thank you again for watching the show. Later on in the show, we're going to have an activist in her home right and the founder of She Can Win Now, Jasmine Sessoms, to talk about how she's supporting women and mentoring them to get more engaged in civic life. And later on in the show, we're going to talk about the news headlines from Donald Trump, for real lying to us. I mean, like not a little white lie, like big lies. And maybe we'll get a little Kamala Harris's appearance in Florida today. More trying to unravel the conundrum of the Latino vote in Florida. But to begin this conversation, to discuss about how we thrive in this fight going throughout 2020 and beyond, my co-host, and of course, the long-lost cousin, Denise Padin Collazo. Buenas noches, Denise.
Hey, buenas noches, Ray. It's really nice to be here. Thank you. My tocayo, last name twin.
Absolutely. People are like, wow, you're really, I mean, it is truly a family affair. It's like, well, I spoke to Denise's husband. Doesn't seem like there's a very close connection, but obviously we're all fam here. But Denise is a longtime activist, really someone that really is passionate about mentorship, community building, and now an author of her book that comes out in early 2021, Thriving in the Fight. So we're really excited to talk to you about that, Denise. Why don't we start this conversation? Look, we're going to get into, I know I want to share a few things about Trump's nonsense and kind of how we should try to process that at this moment in our history. Later on the show, talk a little bit about Jasmine and Denise, get their thoughts just about how we build coalition moving forward and some of these other news headlines. But let's start, Jasmine, Denise, with a little bit about yourself, how you got into organizing, and what led you to the point of writing this wonderful book that's in pre-order right now, Thriving in the Fight.
I have been a community organizer and an activist really my whole adult life. And it really comes from the fact that I come from a long line of women who have fought against all odds to protect and help their families not just survive, but to thrive. And I've been a community organizer in California and Florida, across the country at the national level, run ballot campaigns and electoral fights and local organizing work around health and education and many other issues. As a Latina, as a woman of color, I just so often run across so many of the women, my hermanas who are out listening and watching, who are basically the backbone of our movement, whether you're in the labor movement or faith-based organizing, or if you're leading in a public school, you are leading into your vision, you are living into the fullest sense of who you are, and you are loving past all the negatives. And right now we have a lot of negatives. We've got COVID-19, we've got the racial reckoning that this country has been, long, for many, many years avoiding. And our people and our children and our families are under threat. And so we need 100% of my hermanas and my sisters, Black and brown women from all communities, to thrive, to bring 100% of your creativity into this fight, that when we wake up every morning, every day, we're going up against some of the biggest giants who are making life harder for our kids and our families. So I wrote the book because I want to be an encouragement. I want women to know that I see you, I see the work you do. The work you do is important, and we need you in the fight, not just surviving, but to thrive.
And one of the reasons I wanted to have you, Denise, on the show, that's very powerful, not only to share your powerful message in general, but in this time in our history, one of the things, and I'm very proud to say that this is a platform, Found Translation, Bomba Live, that simulcast, and our social media platforms are very much a platform for people who often don't get heard in the larger political conversation, particularly women, women from diverse communities. And one of the things that, we try to do in this show, and that's why we try to lighten it up and talk to artists and talk to people from spiritual leaders, different parts of our community, is that we want to also help our leaders, our advocates, especially those the core of our community, which is Black and Latina women that are really the foundation of our activism and in so many of our community spaces, so that they can live a balanced life. We don't want to stress y'all out to death, you know? We want to live healthy lives. So what in particular about what drew you to write this book specifically? Because you could have written it about a lot of sort of activist related topics, but you really are focusing this book on how to help our folks thrive during this crisis time and really achieve that life balance. So what about this moment led you to writing Thriving in the Fight?
I was the first Latina and the first woman, period, to have a family and, start out as a young organizer and stay in the work. A lot of what would happen is people would be involved in activism and organizing until about the time they decided they wanted to make a family or have a chosen family. And I raised my daughter. She's now a grown woman. And it was a lot because as Latinas, as Boricuas, as women of color, we carry outsized responsibilities, both at work and at home. And I think it's really important to recognize that. Sometimes the other day I was talking to a friend of mine, it was 9:30 in the morning. By that point, she had already, helped bathe her child, comb the hair, breakfast, driven the kids. It's a lot that we manage. And a lot of times at work, we end up carrying a lot of emotional labor at our organizations, and then we do the same thing at home. So we've created a program where every day at an organization I work with, we created a program where 4 days a week we focus on doing our work, and the 5th day is designed for our own creativity, development, reading, writing, and just getting better, recognizing that big part of what we need is to have some margin in our lives and pace ourselves, because this is a fight of generations, not just a sprint.
And you're listening and watching to Denise Padin Collazo, author, activist, community builder, mentor, someone that really has a passion for mentoring and supporting our folks, has done a lot of work in the faith area, which is something that we try to highlight here, because oftentimes, Denise, the larger political, ideological forces try to sort of pit our community against each other, even within our own community. And we try to build those bridges because while there's some difficult conversations around some of these more sensitive issues that are tied into our faith, we have a lot more in common than we have apart. And even if we don't agree on every issue, we're all still family. And almost all of us, virtually all of us, are trying to strive for the right things. Denise, we're going to hear more about your book in a moment. And again, we encourage people to go to DeniseCollazo.com and pre-order it. Denise, why don't you let people know, before we get to this first clip, I want to get your thoughts as well about the sort of Trump's Leves Revolu, sort of the rollout of this book and why it's important for folks to pre-order Thriving the Fight right now.
Well, as coronavirus has really changed our lives, we had to think about how we're going to get this message out to community organizers and activists and people who are working on the front lines of change in a different way than you would normally do so. So I've tapped into my networks and my friends and my hermanas, compañeras, and people like Ray who are willing to help us promote the book in advance of a launch. So our goal is to generate enough pre-orders so that we can debut on the New York Times bestseller list. And so that's why we need your help right now to help get this message out to those women in your life and the people around you, school teachers and others who are on the daily leading the fight for change. So DeniseCollazo.com, please take a look around and see what you think.
And as my father would say when he was on radio in the 70s, 80s in Philadelphia, Collazo spelled, do say it's slow, Collazo. So, and y'all should know how to spell Denise. So before we learn more we're going to hear later about some of Denise's, not only the book, but some of her organizing strategies and mentoring strategies to build community. And in a moment, we're going to introduce Jasmine Sessoms onto the program. But I did want to get to talk about some of the big news headlines of the week. In terms of going into this election, we're less than 2 months away from certainly the biggest election day of our lifetimes in the modern American history. But, what most people in the political class are talking about, or virtually most Americans are talking about, are these newest revelations from excerpts, not only excerpts from Bob Woodward's new book on Donald Trump, but actually audio tapes of his statement where he basically, well, y'all could hear it for himself. He certainly did not tell us publicly during those first critical weeks and months of the COVID-19 pandemic that was impacting the United States at that point. But it's pretty clear he knew what was going down. So let's hear this clip, and then we'll get some thoughts about how this impacts the race here on Found in Translation, Bomba Live Simulcast.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5 per. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Well, that was pretty telling. And so we're here with Denise Collazo. So look, as we hear the coquis in the background. Where are you at in Puerto Rico right now, Denise? Shout it out.
I'm in Ciales, Puerto Rico, where our family lives, and I'm right by the river and enjoying the sound of the coquis and all of the beautiful wildlife here in my new home.
It's wonderful. So great to see our folks migrating back to the island to support our folks on the island. It's a beautiful thing. But that, look, there's some, and for people that I think we may have had some technical difficulties, but in terms of the bottom line is that Trump admitted during those critical times, and there was part of that interview was in February, the other was in early March, where he would go on television saying, this isn't a big deal. I'm going to go over things like mass and, mass shutdowns and children getting, or how you access it. He was very clear, and that was unclear to us, whether he really knew the severity of it because of his density. But he actually was pretty clear-minded and was heard loud and clear his medical experts about the potential danger of this pandemic, and was blatantly lying to us. And not only did he do that, but now he's admitted it. Now we have on record publicly. But I think it shows, and this is something, Denise, that one of the things I want our country to get out of this crisis time is that this really challenges this whole situation with Trump really challenges what I think was a bad stereotype of leadership could be, and what maybe what kind of leadership we should give as a country. Because this concept of, well, I knew he was a bad guy, but I thought he could do a good job. That doesn't work, because ultimately in moments like this, when you have to forget about politics, forget about your own interests, forget really everything else, and really focus on what's best for the country at this moment. When you don't care about anybody else, or you just focus on your own personal political viability or your own personal life for whatever reason, that lack of connection with people and that lack of care for people cannot lead to good management. So Denise, I know you've worked with a lot of faith communities. What does this moment teach us about that we should teach not only our own lives, but organizing lives about, this? We have to have a new way of thinking about leadership in politics.
Well, you talk about faith, and when I think about the faith, most faiths have a basic tenet that you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And I see here in Puerto Rico, everyone's wearing masks, and that's a way of showing that you love your neighbor, that you don't want to get that neighbor sick, and you want to protect that neighbor's abuelita who might be sick at home. And, we know that Latinos right now, the biggest thing that they're concerned about is kids having to go back to school with COVID. And I think our communities are very astute. They see what's happening. They see that COVID has been devastating to unemployment. So many of our people are out of work in many, many industries. 84% of Latino parents are worried about the impacts of coronavirus when they send their kids back to school. So the Latino electorate and the men and women in our communities, we see what's happening, and we know that we're going to be the ones who keep our families safe. And that's part of why I think it's really exciting that we've got somebody like Jasmine on to talk about more women running for office, because if we don't represent our community, someone else will try to.
And the big question a lot of people are saying is, and this gets into the Florida conversation we're going to have in a second, is, well, I mean, this is obviously amongst the most shocking things that have come out. I mean, even days ago, reports, we don't have it on tape, but pretty solid reporting. Nobody's refuted it. That, he called fallen service members losers and suckers and all the other nonsense, all those disgusting things. This is just the latest shocking thing he said of the week. So the question is, will this impact Trump? Well, it certainly can't help him. I think we have to sort of understand that 42%, there's virtually nothing that can stop it, because there's so much tied into what he represents to them, and very little of it's really policy, and very little of it's really good government. It's really about this sense that, that part of our community, there's kind of sort of brainwashed by Republican media and is just living in another set of facts, or it feels this sense of, this young multicultural country moving forward is sort of leaving me behind. So there's not much we're going. He'll lose a couple folks, but he's not really gonna. There's not much we can do about that. But we can take this as an opportunity to say, to Denise's point, to speak to people that maybe wouldn't vote for Trump, but aren't that excited about Biden. And we're seeing some polling, particularly in the Latino community in Florida, that speaks to that. He's still sort of an open slate to some folks to really speak about. Let's talk about the world you want to have, and you want to have a government and leadership that, even if they're not perfect, or you would maybe agree with everything on, is going to care about the concerns you have as a parent, as a worker, as a mother, as an activist, someone from your community, and is really going to have sort of, at least we're going to work from the same value set, even if if other things maybe are not as congruent. And frankly, we've got to mobilize people that are from our community that have our same faith and values in the situation. So this idea that, there's lots of people, particularly our younger people, particularly women in our community, that are in line with us, but they need not only to learn a little bit more about what Biden would potentially do, to have a better understanding of what his leadership approach is and his policies. And he's got all kind of policies related to our community that, frankly, very few of us have ever read. So we've got to get that information out in a way that's succinct and people can understand it. But, we've got to do the day-to-day hard organizing in the next 2 months to make sure that all of our young cousins and neighbors, those 18 to 24-year-olds and in that range, are registered to vote. We still have time for that, but not too much time in most states. And our vote by mail process, and that voting process this year, is really going to be a process. We're going to have to plan and really have to guide people through our state laws and the dynamics around COVID.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. Really, when you talk about, there's so many people who are not engaged in using their voice and their vote. And the vote is one of those things that everyone only has one of. And it's one great equalizer when we use it. I think a big part of what we're seeing right now with, I'm so excited about this emerging group of leaders. That's part of why I was so excited to write the book, because the new generation of leaders, they're not playing. And they are not going to wait their turn. They are leading. They are challenging our systems and demanding more of us as a country. Thank God for, Alicia Garza, from Black Lives Matter, and the entire movement that has caused an awakening, not an awakening, but a reckoning in America about how we are treating one another and how it is that some people's lives are being valued more than others. And in the book, I really, I have a whole chapter on naming, noticing, and disrupting anti-Blackness in our communities, our Latino communities, because that is a really important issue for us. We need to center the leadership of our Afro-Boricua, our Afro-Latina sisters, our Caribbean sisters, in order for us to actually become the country that we have always wished we were. It's been Black women and Black and Latina women throughout the ages that have been leading our country to actually be its fullest self. So we need you. We need you to continue to thrive and fight, and don't give up. We need you. We love you. And the work you do is important. We see you, and we're grateful for all the things that you do.
Absolutely. We're gonna pause this conversation because we want to get Jasmine Sessoms from She Can Win Now into this conversation. Before we bring Jasmine onto the show, we're going to play a few clips of this hilarious. We're going to lighten it up for a moment. Guidelli Axel, this adorable these YouTube children that do these wonderful comedy skits from San Juan, Puerto Rico. We had them on the show last week with their father Jesus. So we're going to watch a few of these adorable clips from Guidelli Axel and come back and bring Jasmine Sessoms from She Can Win Now into this conversation here on the Found in Translation Bomba Live simulcast. We're a very special co-host today, Denise Collazo.
Vamos a empezar de nuevo. ¿Cuánto es 2 más 2?
No sé.
¿Cómo se llama esto?
Eso es un 4.
Así que 2 más 2 es igual a... Vamos a tratar de esta manera. Aquí hay 2 galletas y en el plato hay 2 galletas. Si muevo estas 2 galletas al plato, ¿cuántas galletas hay en el plato? Axel.
Galletas.
Axel, ¿cuántas galletas hay en el plato?
Es de...
Próximo. Superman. ¿Qué tú haces aquí?
Para solicitar los chavos de Trump.
¿Tú rendiste planilla el año pasado? ¿Te leíste 100 años de soledad?
¿Qué tiene que ver eso?
Ah, se me cayó el sistema.
Hello.
Perdón. Lugar de nacimiento.
Criptón.
¿Dónde queda eso?
Por Ponce.
Bueno, te va a llegar el depósito entre mañana y junio 2022.
That is darling.
Are they not awesome?
Oh my God.
They're
Yes.
they're
That was like my first experience at Sesco here in Arecibo. We spent like a day and a half to get my driver's license, so I could totally relate.
I can imagine. So we want to bring into this conversation and talk about, we've been talking to Denise Collazo about sort of her organizing philosophy and sort of this age of the coronavirus, and obviously leading up to this election, how we not only support our organizers, really our women of color organizers, but help them thrive during this time. And who better to continue that conversation but the founder and CEO of She Can Win Now and She Can Win Now, and a new friend to the show, Jasmine Sessoms. Jasmine, welcome to Found in Translation Bomba Live simulcast.
Hi, how are you?
It's great to have you on the show, Jasmine. Why don't we start with tell us a little bit about you have so many, professionally, you have so many credits to your name. But you have a great passion for engaging women in civic engagement. So tell us about what led you to, you could be doing a lot of things this cycle, but what led you to founding She Can Win, and tell us a little bit more about the work you're doing there.
So I founded She Can Win back in 2014. And basically it was just, I didn't see a whole bunch of people that looked like me in the legislature. And I was concerned. I wanted to know why. So I just started asking questions as to why there weren't a lot of women, specifically women of color, in elected office. And I asked a couple of women who were elected officials at the time, and they were very honest with me. They were like, this is really hard. It's challenging, fundraising. It's kind of an all boys club. There is no support for women, especially women of color. So at that time I was like, well, I wonder, I used to be a fundraiser. Well, I still am, but I used to be a big fundraiser. And I just said, I wonder if I could start a program. And it wasn't really like a program at the time. It was just a thing. So 2 of my girlfriends wanted to run for office, and they didn't know much, right? They weren't being supported by the Democratic Party. And so they came to me. They knew I was in politics. I had worked on lots of races by that time. They were kind of like, can you teach us about politics? And I was kind of like, sure. Whatever you want to know. And whatever I don't know, I'll go find someone that does. So in my basement, we sat, and it was about 12 women, and we trained them. We trained them to run for office. Out of that 12, I think 4 won. 4 ran, 2 won without the Democratic Party's support, without any support. And after that, it was kind of like word of mouth, and it spread and it spread and it spread. And next thing I knew, it was a thing. And she And now, 6 years later, we've trained over 600 women.
That's fantastic. And what have you found, Jasmine? What have you found have been sort of the breakthroughs? Because I think we have a sense of sort of the challenges, right? That women aren't the first ones to get supported by the parties generally, and then women have other responsibilities they're trying to juggle, right, with family and career. So what have you found has been sort of the help, that breakthrough to give women more of a foundation to feel confident to actually run for office?
So I don't know if it's necessarily a breakthrough. Like, again, we were founded back in 2014 before what they call the pink wave.
Yes.
That happened in 2016 when President Trump was elected. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a breakthrough. I would say that, here's the thing. Women, specifically women of color, they've been doing the work, right? They've been the ones registering people to vote. They've been the ones bringing their mama and their girlfriends and everybody else to the polls. They've been the one working on political campaigns, just not in leadership positions where they're visible. But women have always done the work, especially women of color. I remember when I was very young, going to the voting polls with my parents, but more specifically like my mom and my nana. So women have been doing the work, right? I think now they're just starting to move more towards the forefront where they want to take their rightful place at the table. And if you don't have room for them at the table, they'll just build their own table. And I think you're seeing more and more of that happen, right? But it's not necessarily like a new trend. Women have always been the backbone of politics.
That's right.
Women of color have been the backbone of politics. She Can Win just actually came out with a new t-shirt line, and it's called Sisters of the Movement. And, you look at Angela Davis, you look at Fannie Lou Hamer, you look at Shirley Chisholm, you look at Dolores Huerta,
Ella Baker. I mean, so many women were responsible for the civil rights movement that rarely get acknowledged publicly.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And it's Black and brown women have been doing the work for years and years. And now I just think that there is more of a spotlight on them, but they've been there. We've been doing this forever. Right, Denise?
Yeah, well, what I love about what you're doing is that you said this wasn't a thing. That's a perfect example of leading into your vision. When you see something that no one else can see, if you don't lead into it, it won't happen. And if you wish and wait and wonder, it won't happen. So I love what you're doing, and you're right. So often what happens is that there's these people in offices far, far away from our communities that are devising these brilliant strategies for how we should reach out to our own people. And we know how to reach our own people. So I'm really excited. I want to hear how it is that you're doing this. In particular, you mentioned that you're training leaders from multiple political orientations. So can you tell me how that is? I'm curious what a training session looks like when you've got someone who's Green Party and Dem and Republican. I'm curious how that goes.
So we're completely nonpartisan. So even on your application, we don't ask you what party affiliate you're with. So most of the time when you get to a She Can Win boot camp or training class, we don't know if you're a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, or a Green Party.
Gotcha.
And we break up our groups. And eventually, obviously, their political affiliation comes out. But we have projects and we do call time together where these people are depending on the women next to them to get the project done, right? So let's say if we have 3 women in a group, well, one person's being like the donor, the next person's being the candidate, and the next person is being the call time manager. So Republican, independent, Green Party, et cetera, you all got to raise money. And that's something
right.
to bond over, right? And so I think that brings down the barriers when you're doing something that no matter what party affiliation, you all have to do it and you're all working through and learning it together. And I think that ground zero level, before you get to the state house, before you get to city council, before you get to the school board, I think starting at the ground level of a training, right, and taking off the labels is something that really bonds women together.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really exciting. And what are you seeing? What are you hearing from women who are running for office today, who are up for election in November? What are you hearing from them? What concerns are they running into? And what are you learning?
Well, first and foremost, COVID, right? Like,
Oh yes, COVID. Yeah.
every single candidate that I've spoken to, especially we do endorse candidates through our political action committee. They have said that COVID has changed the way that we view politics, right? So normally it's whoever has the most money wins. Last cycle that we saw, that just wasn't true. Especially here in our Commonwealth, there were many startup candidates. Let's take it to Regina Young, who came through a She Can Win training, who beat Maria Donatucci, who is an institution, right? And Regina did it with $9,000. Whereas to beat an incumbent that ingrained in the community would normally cost you close to $100,000. So COVID has really changed the way candidates are connecting with voters. They are using innovative and non-traditional avenues to really connect with that voter. And if you don't master it fairly quickly, you're in trouble, right? Because things are like this. They're startups, 6 months tops. But also, women are starting to get more support from traditional avenues, right? So like the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, if you notice, they're all putting forth and endorsing more women right now. Right. And on the Democratic side, they're putting more energy into women of color. I will say, like in this presidential election, my organization might be one of the more popular organizations because everybody wants to connect with Black women right now. Everybody wants to ensure that they have our votes and what can we do? What's interesting to you? But I also, from a voting perspective, I've sat on a bunch of panels, and right now people are looking to weaponize their vote. And I always say that, weaponize their vote. So what does that mean, right? It means that you're no longer just casting a vote for the candidate because your ward leader told you to. You are no longer casting a vote because you saw a commercial. You are now asking the candidate, what are you going to do for me to make my life better? How are you making, and I live in Philadelphia, Philly, a better place to live, work, and play? And they are no longer just giving away their vote. They're saying, if you want my vote, you have to work for it. So that's definitely a completely new trend nowadays.
That's amazing.
No, that's true. Yeah. Do you have another question, Denise?
I just I'm glad you're holding it down in Philly. I was recently talking to a statewide elected official who did not get the endorsement of her party early on, and it makes a difference. One of my people who are part of the Thriving in the Fight advisory board, she's just got elected as city council in New Mexico. And, it didn't cost as much as another election would, in part because she had that community support. But really, if we would just listen, if our country would just listen to the gut instincts of Black and brown women, so much would be different. But so often that's not the case. So I'm really grateful that you're out there really soliciting and eliciting the vision and the hope, and you're helping candidates lean into, actually making their own space and not waiting for an invitation. Right.
Yeah, Jasmine, I wanted to ask you a question. Is that as it relates to, supporting candidates and supporting whether they win or lose, because I ran for office several years ago, and one of the things I tell people, new people that run for office for the first time, is I said it's actually much more of a bigger personal and spiritual experience than a political one, because you come out of running for office, win or lose, a different person because of the journey that you go through. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think so many people think about it as, from a political perspective, I always thought the politics was the easy part. You deal with people, and that's where you focus on, kind of why you get into it in the first place, right? Engaging the public, but all the other stuff can be really stressful. So can you talk a little bit about how you prepare people to get into the mindset about what to expect? Because you can work on campaigns all you want, but you don't really know until you run for office yourself.
No, you're absolutely right. I've never run for office. I never will run for office. Just not my calling. But I will say, when
said many, many, many women.
many
I've heard that before too.
people say that all the time. They think I will change my mind.
Yeah,
I will tell you I will
that's
not.
okay. All right.
But you're absolutely right. It's almost like preparing a prize fighter for a championship match, right? We take them through A through Z, what she can win. So like we look at your finances. Like, are you financially prepared to run for office? Because it is a full-time job. And I'll talk just where we sit in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Elections cost money and they are full-time jobs. Like you have to door knock from sun up to sundown, robocall, phone calls, call time, making appearance, shaking hands, kissing baby. Like it is very hard. I've only seen one candidate do it somewhat successfully, is keep a full-time job and run for office. And I've worked on over 142 campaigns in 11 years. So it's difficult. Most people have to quit their jobs. So first and foremost, we look at their financial situation and say, what are your bills? Do you have enough money saved up? Are you financially prepared to run for office? Because that is a stressor, right? And campaigns are already stressful enough. You do not need additive stress. Next week, we want to talk to your family. Does your family support you? Because having that support system is going to be so important when you are running for office. Who is your kitchen cabinet? Who are you talking to when you're stressed out? What are the things like that you're doing to unwind? You'd be shocked. The average person does not have a hobby.
I know. These days it's crazy.
Netflix doesn't count,
It's
Jasmine?
true. No.
Candy Crush doesn't count.
No, the average person doesn't have a hobby. So one thing that we try to do is help our candidates find a hobby, right?
Well, yes, exactly. Because taking care of kids and running, that's not a hobby.
Not a hobby. That's what we do as women. We will do everything
for everyone else.
For everybody else and forget about ourselves. So that's something else that we stress. We teach about time management. And then we go into like, what is it to run for office, fundraising, field work, organizing, volunteer maintenance, campaign management, your stump speech, your platforms. So we do all of that, but we also do the other side of how are you taking care of you and how are you truly preparing yourself to launch a campaign?
That's right.
Yeah, because then when you win, that's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning.
That's right. And by the way, when you lose, that's just the beginning. And that's the other part.
That's true.
And, there's a good chance you're not going to win that first time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't continue. And how do you build off whatever the next step is? It could lead to other opportunities. I lost when I ran several years ago in Philadelphia, but, now I'm the national political director for the largest Latino organization in the country. So it's like, it led to other things. But if I didn't embrace the challenge and embrace the next steps, then that wouldn't have led to my role in national politics. And I wouldn't have met and connected with people like Jasmine and Denise. So we're having a great conversation with two great leaders. And we're going to have a quick break. Jasmine, we're going to play a clip from a previous episode. We don't have a live music artist on this episode, but we're going to have a clip from one of our great divas that comes on the show on occasion to provide her gift of singing. Heidi Ann Rosa from Rochester, New York. I not only wanted to play a clip from Heidi's recent performance on the show because she has a wonderful voice, but has a very powerful spiritual message in her music, but also want to give a lot of love to the community in Rochester, New York, that's dealing with a lot of issues now and looking for justice and demanding justice for the loss of Daniel Prude and the Prude family who's going through some terrible times up there. So let's hear this clip from Heidi. And when we come back, Jasmine, I got friends all over the country, particularly our Southwest friends are very worried about Pennsylvania. So I just wanted to see if you could just give our folks a little thumbnail. And then I'm going to do the same thing with Denise about the great state of Florida. So let's hear Heidi sing some inspirational music to us. And we'll come back with Jasmine Sessoms and Denise Collazo here on the Sound and Translation Bomba Live simulcast.
My strength, my God, my love, my life, you're all I need to get me through the darkest night. My peace, I 'cause I know you'll never leave my side. Broken and confused, nothing left to lose. Oh, I just feel like there's no close.
Heidi Rosa, that was so beautiful. Wasn't that beautiful?
Lovely. That was beautiful.
With Denise and Jasmine, no, Heidi's a fantastic talent. Jasmine, so can you help people get off the ledge about Pennsylvania, or maybe you want them to get on the ledge? So, for people that don't know some of the dynamics here, Jasmine and I have been in campaigns in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania for a long time. So, Jasmine, obviously, no one expects this to be a blowout either way. It was very close. Pennsylvania is an interesting state because off elections, it can get very red, particularly with governors and statewide elections. We have a very conservative. One of our senators is a very conservative Republican. We currently do have a Democratic governor now, but again, it's off cycle. It's a toss up. It generally has been since 2016, pretty blue and presidential since the 80s. But there's a lot of dynamics in play here. It's diversifying, but also sort of. That rural red vote is sort of getting further entrenched. So, Jasmine, give people a thumbnail of what you see as what's happening here in Pennsylvania for folks to understand.
Pennsylvania, again, we are truly a swing state. We can go either way, right? And I don't know. I wish I did have a prediction. We truly can go either way. I do see a lot of people fired up for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris. They are doing a really hard push here in PA. VP Biden has his campaign headquarters here, downtown Philadelphia. So you can see them, see his staff. They are working Pennsylvania hard. And I am, she can win is completely nonpartisan, but right is wrong is wrong. And our Trump presidency is just wrong. We cannot take another 4 years of that. And I do believe that Pennsylvanians feel that. The majority of Pennsylvanians feel that. We still have Pennsylvanians protesting, wearing masks. But I think that at its very core, the majority of Pennsylvania will vote for VP Biden and Senator Kamala Harris.
And then Jasmine, give people. Obviously, you could teach college courses on this, but one of the things I get frustrated by the national pundits is that they kind of put Pennsylvania kind of in the Chris Matthews box, right? So it's like there's a lot of black people in Philly, then there's a lot of educated white people in the suburbs, then there's a bunch of farmers, and then there's some people in Pittsburgh, some of which are black. So, it's a lot more complicated than that. There's our suburbs are much more diverse, partially, frankly, because of gentrification, frankly, and housing, crunches in the city. The 222 corridor has become increasingly diverse, especially with the Latino population. And just in general, we just have a lot of different dynamics. We also have a lot of working class white folks in the city that the Trump message, for whatever reason, appeals to them. That we have one in Northeast Philadelphia, as what's the state representative there? Tina McBride. I mean, she could represent somebody in the middle of Tennessee, that woman, or Alabama. She's insane. Yeah. And so can you talk a little bit about some of the dynamics that you see on the ground that people should understand that, that they're not getting these sound bites in these national conversations?
Pennsylvanians aren't a monolith. Black people, brown people, we are not monoliths, right? So what appeals to me doesn't even appeal to my husband. I think whoever is running as a candidate, presidential candidate, needs to know how to connect to people at their core. What are the intrinsic values that they care about, right? But in terms of what are you hearing on the ground, the same thing that we all are saying. We can't do 4 more years. How did we even let this happen to begin with? We are tired. But then on the flip side, people don't like Joe Biden. They think that he is a bit too old, even though he's not much older than Trump. They think that he doesn't have a good grasp. They think he won't do things for them. And I've even heard black people say that. Joe Biden doesn't care about black people. His track record is bad. They're bringing up his old track record. So again, it truly can go either way. I just have to hold faith that people want to live. People want to see the economy turn around. People want a president that tells the truth. So, I'm out here, even though we are nonpartisan, I'm out here pushing the Biden message of we cannot do 4 more years of Trump.
I hear you, Jasmine. And, the other thing people have to understand with this issue, people around the country need to understand this, is that with this issue around vote by mail, I don't want to say by coincidence, but the way how luck would have it, this is before COVID went down. This was the first year Pennsylvania was going to have an expanded vote by mail system. So we were already, I guess, a little bit got ahead of the game. There was a lot of bumps and bruises in the primaries. But, so this will be the first general election cycle and the first opportunity most people are going to have to even have that option. So there's a lot of education that's got to take place. And there's folks in our community, rightfully so, particularly in the collar counties and the suburban, in the rural ex-urban counties that are like, I don't know if I trust submitting my vote that way. And that's real. And we got to develop strategies to tap into to assuage people's concerns and help them go through this process.
That's part of what we're looking at in Florida too, Ray, is just the fact that, anyone who, thinks they can predict what's going to happen this election is just lying because there's too many uncertainties between COVID and, I work with Pastor Rhonda Thomas, who spent time after the 2018 election in Florida looking at piles of uncounted votes in the post office. So there's 2.4 million people in Florida who, if they want to vote by mail, they have to have a printer, they have to print out a piece of paper, they have to have an envelope and a stamp, and they have to mail something in by a deadline. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. Our job as leaders and community organizers and activists is to help people walk through that process. I also think a big challenge in Florida, and I think across the country, is going to be that even my daughter, who grew up, sorry, honey, but she grew up attending community organizing actions and canvases and this and that. She said to me, Mom, I'm not sure I'm voting this time. And so I actually think that could be a challenge for us, is people just not voting, because in Louisiana, we just had a hurricane that, Hurricane Laura that blew through. In Florida, we have, different ways to to respond to COVID, depending upon which county you're in. Different elections departments are going to be doing different things. And so that's why we need the women, the people who have been tending to this democracy since before it was a country, to be talking to people one-on-one. We need to be talking to our friends, our family, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, everyone that we know, and encouraging them to register, to actually remind them when it's time to vote. Because you know what? Those are the people that most parties and candidate campaigns and issue measures or issue campaigns, they don't reach out to. And they don't have all that work and that money that's being spent on them to get them out to vote. So I think it's going to be, I heard somebody say it's kind of like a tornado. You just don't know where it's going to end up. But I do believe that our people see what's happening. They're concerned about COVID. They're concerned about, the future, our public education for our kids. So many children don't even have computers, and our families are actually experiencing that in a guttural way. And that's why I say we need our leaders to thrive, because we're going head to head. Jasmine, you and me and many, many other people across this country, women particularly, are going head to head with the biggest giants who are out to tear our families apart. But my bet is on us.
That's right. I want to get Jasmine and Denise's take. Speaking of Florida, good segue. Vice presidential candidate, of course, California Senator Kamala Harris was in Miami today talking to African Americans and had an opportunity to make a pit stop at a Venezuelan restaurant, to the surprise of a lot of Latinos and delight a lot of Latinos in South Florida. Let's hear a clip from the Senator Harris's stop in Miami. And I want to ask Jasmine and Denise their thoughts about how Blacks and Latinos should be thinking about working together in this cycle and moving forward.
This is about, and the reason that we are doing this is that the American people deserve to be seen and heard. And if their government is going to be at all relevant to their lives, it is because we do this in response to their needs. And the thing about Joe Biden is that he understands that the expression of strength of a human being and of a leader is not measured by who you beat down, It's measured by who you lift up.
So the question I have, and then after that, she went to a Venezuelan restaurant in Doral, which is a very, people know it's like Little Caracas, and down in South Florida, in a community that's really up for grabs. And, some are concerned, maybe leaning towards Trump because of this, this messaging that Trump's team has been very aggressive about as well. Democrats are socialists, communists. You left Venezuela because of Maduro. Now you're going to get Biden. And so I think that was very strategic, and that surprised the parents to pick up some empanadas de pollo. So why don't we start with you, Denise? Obviously the African American, Latino, and Caribbean coalition in Florida can be very powerful. We saw that during the Obama races, and the potential's there, but there's obviously some challenges in organizing a very diverse population. So, what are your thoughts around Senator Harris being a bridge for the Biden-Harris ticket to engage more African Americans, Caribbeans, and Latinos in this election?
Yeah, it's really good. If you think about Latinos right now are about 59 million of the U.S. population. Between Black and Latino families, we're around 100 million people of the 300 million people in this country, or maybe 300 and change. And so in my book, I talk a lot about the importance of Latinx and African American, Afro-Caribeños, us working together, not because it's politically important, which I believe it is. I believe that the road to the White House runs through the Black and brown communities in our country. But I think the reason it's so important for us to work together is because we can't be whole people unless we do. And so I think to the extent that any candidate can identify as an immigrant, that helps reach out to Black immigrants, to Latino immigrants. So I think that, Kamala Harris laying herself out as an immigrant is something that I think is a smart move politically. And I think, I think that's the key to our liberation is it really rests in the power of Black and brown women. So I'm curious what you think on this, Jasmine.
So for me, here's the thing. She's definitely going to bring Black and brown people out, people that might have been on the fence about, like, I don't really like Biden. It's more of the same old of an older white man running our country. She will pull those demographics, the HBCUs, historically Black colleges like I went to, being in a sorority, we're in the same sorority. So there is this like finite group of women, specifically Black and brown women, that are going to support him because we see ourselves in her, right?
Yes.
And when you see yourself in somebody, it is automatically identifiable. And that is going to be like kind of like their superpower. But on the flip side of that, I can honestly tell you, those women were already engaged. Those women were already voting. Yeah. Those women weren't only just voting, but they're making sure
stuffing envelopes, making t-shirts.
And let's keep it real. A lot of those women are the ones that made the call that Biden was the way to go in the primary.
So, yes,
she's
going to energize, she's going to excite, but those people were already civically engaged. We have to figure out, how are you reaching those people on the sidelines, as you said, or those people that are still on the fence? Is Senator Harris that superpower for them? Is she that honey? Is she that glue or the tape that can bring those people in and make it stick to the Biden-Harris ticket?
Yeah, no, and I encourage people to look up Chuck Rocha, who was one of the senior advisors for the Bernie Sanders campaign and was credited, rightfully so. He's got a new book out, The Bernie, the Chronicle. They were able to mobilize the Latino vote for Bernie and really that really helped Bernie be much more competitive this cycle with voters of color. But that, he's got some critical analysis of the Biden campaign, an article that came out in Vox today, because he doesn't see, and I think we all can kind of agree that there hasn't been a significant amount of investment in mobilizing the Latino vote. And you were seeing these polling numbers, which are looking a little soft and around the country generally, but really in Florida, it's borderline alarming with some of these numbers. There's time, because I think a lot of people, frankly, don't get focused on this till toward the end. But also, there's going to need to be a lot of investment and talking about those issues. We've seen some polling in Pennsylvania, for example, that what Latino voters want to hear about in Pennsylvania is this conversation you were discussing, Denise, around educating our children and how that relates to COVID and just how it relates to the education of our children in general, because most of our children are not in school situations that are ideal and really up to the caliber that our children and all families deserve. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in a short period of time.
Ray, I was just looking at some polling that shows that while, just because a Latino voter may not approve of Donald Trump does not necessarily translate to supporting the other party. So that's something to pay attention to. It just being against something is usually not enough.
No, people want to hear more. And
they want to hear what we're for.
That's right. And, and if the vice president doesn't define himself, the other side, despite their lousy budgeting practices, will have enough money with super PACs and everything else to define him for us. We've had a wonderful conversation with Jasmine Sessoms of She Can Win and Denise Collazo from her new book, Thriving in the Fight. Let's start with you, Jasmine. Any final thoughts you have for our Found in Translation Bomba Life community, and let people know how they continue to support She Can Win?
Go vote. Vote early, vote often. And I always tell people, go vote like a Black woman. Early.
No doubt. Black women, if we get saved on this one, Black women will be the salvation. Yeah. So it's so funny you say that, because yesterday I want to shout out. Well, I don't know if she wants us to announce it publicly, but a good friend of mine in North Jersey reached out, a Latina, dynamic lawyer, reached out to me literally today and said, I'm thinking about running for school board in my community. And, do you have any resources I can tap into? I said, it's funny you say that, because I'm going to have Jasmine on the show tonight. So hopefully she's watching. And we'll definitely connect you, Jasmine. She's fantastic. She would make a great candidate. And we're going to continue to support you. And obviously, locally, we're going to work together. Not only is the census still in the mix, which is going to have, we're very concerned about that. Probably dedicate some time to the show next week on that. But Jasmine and I are going to be working a lot on redistricting next year together. Shout out to Fernando Trevino, who's going to be our conduit with that in Pennsylvania. Denise Collazo, again, an activist. Any final thoughts? We loved hearing the cookies in the background. It's been very therapeutic.
Thank you. Thank you.
And tell us again where we can order the book and how we can support Thriving in the Fight.
We're encouraging people to pre-order the book on any platform except for Amazon, because Amazon has been really bad to our communities, Latino Black communities. And so we're encouraging you to go to denisecollazo.com, or you can look up thrivinginthefight.com, pre-order the book, give it to someone as a present, and all the proceeds for the book are going to be for Latina organizers. That is a fund that will be determined by Latina organizers. So we really want to thank you for your support. Thank you, Ray. Jasmine, it was a blast meeting you. I want to talk to you more. So
you got to keep the conversations going, Jasmine. We need you to be part of the regular rotation. You bring a lot to the table, and so I just want to thank everyone again. Want to thank our Twitch audience. This was actually the first episode we were on Twitch. Hey. So for all you gamers out there, we're supporting you as well. So at Bomba_live. So in between, all the games that people play on there, you can check us out on Twitch as well. And we're gonna again thank you, Jasmine Sessoms, and my co-host for tonight, Denise Collazo. Thank you, Denise. Thank your husband for making these arrangements to have you on the show. We're actually gonna take us out with a recent performance on Bomba Live from Maria Isa, who actually is not only a tremendous activist in her own right, personal friends of George Floyd, a Puerto Rican, a Latina in Minnesota who knew George Floyd personally. So she did this bomba, which is a native Afro-Puerto Rican rhythm, in homage to her late friend George Floyd. So thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Denise. And we're going to take us out with a great performance from Maria Isa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fuego que fuego. Si no pone la gente se va a quemar. Si no pone la gente se va a quemar. Fuego, fuego, Minnesota. Fuego, fuego, Minneapolis. Fuego, fuego para Jorge. Fuego, fuego para los nombres que han matado la policía. Que se largan ya. Que yo no quiero sufrir. Mi gente negra no quieren más, no quieren no sufrir. Que todos tenemos que vivir con unidad y no van a sufrir.